When you're influenced by something, a person or an event, you almost instantly make two decisions. First of all, is this thing novel enough for me? Is this thing new enough for me? So does it have novelty potential? And then immediately afterwards, you're going to ask yourself, do I have enough coping potential? Do I have enough capacity to deal with it? And if you have both yes, you're going to be curious. Curiosity is the only way out for us in the fourth industrial revolution. We have to be smarter. It's not smarter. We don't know the future.
This is the CTQ Smartcast, where we have conversations about upleveling, deliberate practice, and getting future relevant.
I choose to think we think curiosity makes the world go round. And so when we heard of our guest today and his venture, the Global Curiosity Institute, well, we knew we had to talk to him. So our guest today is Stefaan van Hooydonk. Stefaan, welcome to the Smartcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So Stefaan, before we get into your current journey, can you tell us the curious paths that you've taken before you got here?
I think my entire life was one of curiosity. I lived in quite a number of countries. I'm from Belgium originally, and already during my studies, I studied Chinese and economics. And during my studies, I left for China, and then I graduated, and then I moved to Hong Kong, and then in investment consulting in the end of the 1990s, beginning of the at the end of the 1980s. So when China was just opening up, and it was a very dynamic, energizing time, was working in investment consulting, and then moved into the learning space. I set up a business school, or the executive education part of a business school in Shanghai. And then I moved to the corporate side. I joined Nokia in China, moved into Finland, the headquarters of Nokia. And I've been always involved in innovation of learning and being either the head of a corporate university or the chief learning officer or both. And have been doing that indeed in Nokia and then Agfa, and spent some time with Philips, with Flipkart in India, in Bangalore. Had a beautiful time there. And then in Saudi Arabia I was, and in London I was with Cognizant, my last job before I started the institute. And in Cognizant I was in charge of the learning and development for 300,000 people, which in itself is a humbling thought, I think, to make sure that everybody gets constantly driving and also is constantly curious. Because at the end of the day, learning and development can only do so much. We can bring the horse to the water almost, proverbially, but we cannot make it drink. So the more people are really curious and keen to grow themselves, and if the organization is supporting, that magic happens without actually learning and development from doing anything. So that got me excited about learning. But I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it in the next session. Thanks for having me.
Quite a fascinating journey, and I think something that we would expect someone who loves curiosity to kind of have. So Stefaan, a lot of people watching this, probably think that they were curious as children, but their jobs, their professions, they may not really see the role of curiosity in it. So, what do you say to people like them?
Well, indeed, it is true that curiosity has a different notion in society, and we all know that curiosity killed the cat. At least we have that saying, as if curiosity is a bad thing. And indeed, you see, if you're looking at the notion of curiosity through history, you see that curiosity is at best allowed, but in many times in history, it's really frowned upon. Because curiosity has something unruly about it. Curiosity, in my definition, is the desire to challenge the status quo, to learn, to explore, to discover. When you look, for instance, very, very, very interesting, when you're looking at the early church fathers, they were saying that curiosity is bad. because it takes you away from your interest in God. So don't do these strange things and go wandering about in your thoughts, because that's just a negative thing. And all the way till now, when you're looking at the Renaissance, thinkers were thinking, we're starting to explore the world, and we all know that part of history. But often they said curiosity is only relevant for the haves. The have-nots shouldn't be too curious. They just should listen and be quiet, type of thing. You know, and you still see that pervasive after the Industrial Revolution, where the industrialists were the guys with the ideas and the innovation. But the workers, or the blue collars in our current language, were there to just shut up and do what we tell you to do. And we don't want you to venture out too many ideas. Think about Frederick Taylor, who for me is probably the most important thinker in the 20th century, because he invented the economic system that we have now. When he said in his Scientific Management that the managers are there to do the thinking and the not managers are there to do the doing. And please don't think if you're not a doer, type of thing, you know. So we see that nowadays also in our educational system. It's a teacher who knows, and the students who don't know, and shut up and work towards tests. And so while at the same time you're seeing beautiful examples of where curiosity is changing things. And now in COVID times, you see at the company level, because it's not only individuals who can be curious, also companies and even societies can be curious or not. You see that some companies are taking the COVID situation as a beautiful innovation stepping stone, while a lot of companies are just freezing. And maybe we'll talk about it, about some of the barriers to curiosity. Stress and anxiety is the worst thing you can do to curiosity. So, and if you allow it, then things are happening. So back to your question, I think that curiosity is the only way out for us in the fourth industrial revolution. We have to be smarter. It's not smarter, we don't know the future. Until about 10, 15 years ago, there was kind of this linear path towards where we are now, because it was all predictable, like today is predictable upon yesterday. But more and more, and the word has been overused, it's VUCA words, it's the volatile and uncertain type of an environment. Nowadays, if kids go to school, they learn the tricks of the past. But the tricks of the past are not always helping towards solving for the future, because the future is so uncertain. But let me stop here for a second. But the more curious you people are, the more they are, and that's already proven. The more they're making faster careers, they're making more money. The more companies are curious, the more, as I said earlier about COVID, the more they're innovating, and they're allowing innovation from happening, and the more societies thrive. So I hope that people don't focus too much on the cat, but focus more on themselves.
Right. Quite a lot of fascinating threads to unpack there, Stefaan. So, like you mentioned, the frowning down on curiosity, people somewhat associated with a little bit of a mischief. You have to have a little bit of a questioning attitude, a slightly mischievous attitude sometimes, and that can turn off people, the powers that be. But as you said, this year, if there hadn't been centuries or decades of curiosity, we wouldn't be innovating on vaccines. We wouldn't be asking questions like, what does it take to suddenly re-architect your life, the way you work, almost overnight. So you mentioned a few of these barriers. So why don't we get into that? What do you think are the top few barriers that hold people from expressing their curiosity?
Well, it's a beautiful question. I think there's two dimensions, and I'll cover the two dimensions in. Curiosity is not only about the individual. Curiosity is also about the environment. I can be curious, but if my environment is pushing me not to be curious, for instance, if I have an overbearing manager who just wants to me do and not to think, and not to venture ideas and volunteer new questions and things like that, then I'm going to be curious maybe in my private space, but not in my corporate space. So there's also an environment, or if a parent doesn't allow their kids to ask questions with the 70 times why that young kids are asking, then it's proven that actually the intellectual capacity of the child goes down. So the environment is important as well as the individual dimension. I think at an individual detractor would be things, as I mentioned earlier, anxiety, stress. For professionals, routine is an important one. Just doing all the time the same stuff. That's also kind of hampers your curiosity. And also knowledge, having too little or too much. And maybe I'll come to that in a second, what research has shown about curiosity in the perfect spot. So these are some of the individual's barriers: stress, anxiety. If you're talking about stress and anxiety, if you're looking now at refugee camps, or now in COVID, if everything is happening to you, if you're stressful because of the environment, because of other things, you're not going to be curious. It's a little bit like Maslow, you're focusing on survival rather than the next step, because learning and growth and curiosity and innovation are all preparing us for tomorrow, but not for today. Now, some of the environmental or external drivers for as a barrier for curiosity for me are people. People could be enormous uplifters of our curiosity, because it can pull us down. Also, culture and climate. I've seen company where, for instance, there's no rotation policy, where people are not allowed to move from job A to job B, even if they wanted to. So that's not really helping me. That's kind of a culture or an environment, or even algorithms. If you're looking at Facebook and the social media environments, where people are drawn into their own tribe, and are always have messages that confirm my thinking of today, I'm not going to be encouraged to think about what the neighbor thinks, or what some other people that are not part of my thinking environment. If you allow me, I'd love to kind of maybe dwell 1 second on the knowledge part. Sure. Because too little knowledge is hampering for curiosity. Too much knowledge also. So curiosity is following somehow of an inverted U shape. Where if you don't know anything about something, imagine I'm not great at astrophysics. And if people are giving me some formulas or some solar systems in mathematical format, I don't know enough about that. So I'm not going to allow myself to be curious in that space, because I have too little knowledge. People have also found that people are hugely specialized in something and think of themselves as big specialists. They're also not going to be very curious anymore. And there's for instance, some research has shown that there's danger with doctors who have too much experience. They're often less good at diagnosing patients than young doctors who still have this feeling of urge, or am I doing the right thing? Am I going to go deep enough? Am I going to read up on things that I don't know? Also, often young doctors are more in tune with young research, but that's kind of a feeling. And this entire, if your knowledge is just enough, not too much, not too little, then you're often at your best space of curiosity. So there's two dimensions that come in. When you're influenced by something, a person or an event, you almost instantly make two decisions. First of all, is this thing novel enough for me? Is this thing new enough for me? So does it have novelty potential? And then immediately afterwards, you're going to ask yourself, do I have enough coping potential? Do I have enough tools in my head? Do I have enough capacity to deal with it? And if you have both, yes. If you answer yes to both, you're going to be curious. And that's why you're seeing that some people are curious in one thing and less in the other. If I so that's an important thing that often people think that, oh, you have to let knowledge go to be curious. That's the wrong thing. The more knowledge you have, the more you're going to be curious, because you have a better database to create inferences and stuff.
I think that's a really nice framework. One of the the knowledge access and the means or the ability to cope access to look at maybe especially when you're trying to deconstruct why someone is, instead of saying they're not curious, you're probably asking a much better question if you ask what is the right environment for them to be curious in. And I think your example of the doctor, it wasn't a point I thought of earlier, which is, in some sense, you're saying that intellectual humility, the right amount of intellectual humility, is also important for curiosity, because it makes you stop, question whether your knowledge has changed in any fashion, the environment has changed in any fashion, and that humility plus a little bit of safety in terms of asking, being able to express that question, is what I picked up from what you just said.
Beautiful. Very nice. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
there are some organizations who would love to have curiosity in the organization, or sometimes even call it out as a core value. So if you had an organization that said curiosity was a core value, what behaviors do you think you would expect their employees to be exhibiting?
Well, beautiful question. There's probably two things to this. When I talked about the external dimension as well as the internal dimension, a curious organization would need to allow curiosity from happening. So that's the curious organization is creating the right culture, the right climate for innovation to happen. Now, and next to that, of course, there's also the individual to show curiosity. If we're focusing on the individuals for a second, what I've been intrigued with through my career is that some people are naturally just doing this without even being called curious. These people, A players. People that are naturally reading things, that are naturally on top of their game, who are naturally part of the right networks inside the organization, external, who have the natural humility, as you just mentioned, to not pretend they know everything. And so these people, of course, we all want to think of ourselves as being A players, but what research has shown is that about 10 to 15% of your population in your organizations would be really called A players. So these people are doing this naturally. And to your questions, these people already behave in such a way. Now you have the B players, which is the majority of your organization, people that want it and at times are curious, but are not doing it consistently and not doing it all the time. And these people typically are people that need some support. Either support by a manager or support by culture or just support by processes to really become A players. And this is where my experience in my last couple of companies, but by not just telling people, hey guys and girls, you have to be self-propelled and you have to be curious, and because children are curious, you also have to be curious, without realizing that maybe people might have lost some of their curiosity along the way, and not kind of giving the right tools and training and mindset to go in that direction might be just wishful thinking. And in my experience has in actually doing uplifting sessions and training people on mindset, on curiosity, on growth mindset, just planting those seeds in people's minds makes already a lot of difference. And then giving it back, and then people are adults, and if you treat them like adults, they will rise to the occasion. At least the majority of them will.
In fact, I choose to think, we often think of this as nurturing a garden, right? You cannot just pick and just suddenly expect it to grow overnight. It will take its time, but you have to keep watering it. You have to keep tilling the soil, but it takes a little bit of effort from everyone.
Absolutely. I love the metaphor of a garden, because in some cases, as a manager or as a leader, you can only water the plants, but you don't know whether they'll grow big or not. It's up to the plants and the soil and other things to. But managers have such a huge power. I call them the shadow of a manager. The shadow that they're casting on their environment, which can be beautiful. Now, if I'm talking to leaders, often I've not seen any leader, I've not seen any single individual actually, when I'm asking the question, are you curious, who are saying no, actually I'm not curious. Everybody thinks of themselves, and that's a great starting point. Everybody thinks of themselves as being curious. Now, what my own research and a lot of research of others have shown is that when people are referring to curiosity, they only refer to what you could call intellectual curiosity. And what I've added in, and you might have taken the diagnostic I shared with you, and laid the link on over email. Then I'm also focusing on intellectual curiosity, very important, but I'm also focusing on empathic curiosity, social curiosity. Am I curious about others? And then probably the most important one for me is, am I interested about myself? Right. We have two eyes, which is looking externally, looking to the world and looking to others, but we don't really have a sense organ to watch internally, and also schooling is not preparing for this, society is not preparing for this. To go, I'm 52 years old, I'm 52 years of dust on, let's call it my soul. So I cannot penetrate very quickly and very easily into my soul, because I have to plow through 52 years of dust. And how do I do that? How do I kind of uncover the onion, to go all the way to the core? And although we're saying that we are curious and that we are self-aware and that we do self-reflection, it's harder. That's why, maybe moving back to the leaders, there was some beautiful piece of research done by INSEAD, the French business school, and they asked leaders, executives and non-executives, how much their organization would allow for curiosity. And 83% of the leaders says, yes, our organization is doing this, is allowing and is orchestrating curiosity. But only 50% of the non-executives were agreeing with this. So it's also your perception of how, because typically leaders would be the people who put in the extra hours, put in the extra effort, were at times also lucky, I guess, in making their career. So they're more paid to be curious than the non-people. And you might think that your organization is allowing curiosity, but it might not be felt by everybody in your organization. So actually, you made me think about the humility. I think it's a really important dimension. If you're thinking of a number of leaders that kind of come to mind, who are really good at this, kind of big leaders, I would call maybe an Elon Musk, who's trying to put his fingers in so many different things because he wants to kind of explore new things, and then he recruits specialist teams to drive that. Or a Satya Nadella, who changed dramatically Microsoft into a not know-it-all culture, but a learn-it-all culture. So it was okay not to know, and to have this humility, as you mentioned so rightly, to say, I don't know, let's find out together, or what do you think, rather than appearing to be on top of everything all the time. Or a Vas Narasimhan from Novartis, who, and you mentioned it earlier, who is such a believer in this that he changed his corporate values and included curiosity as part of the corporate values, which is a beautiful dimension. But maybe I'm talking too long.
No, I think the definition of a great conversation is where we don't know everything, so we are learning it all in a conversation like this. So it's been fascinating. In fact, I did want to ask about the leaders, and you did mention a few. So let's ask a harder question, the more hard-nosed question of, is there a business case for curiosity that can be made? Because we've quoted examples, we know from personal experience the role that curiosity has played, but is there enough of a case now for curiosity for leaders to just go ahead and bring that in?
Well, that's a very good question. And in 2018, Harvard Business Review came out with a cover story around the business case for curiosity. I definitely think there is a business case. If you're looking at what I said earlier, at our recent COVID environment, you have companies who are freezing, and you have companies who are using COVID as a jumping board towards new greatness. I think that companies would need somehow to find out a better balance between what I would call exploration and exploitation. Exploitation is what we've been so good at until recently. That's the entire function of efficiency, running the right ship, and that's very much in a Frederick Taylorist thinking. And then you have innovation coming in when crisis is hitting us, and we're still looking at our old efficiency matrices. And if we're freezing, it's not really going to help us. And also nowadays with the fourth industrial revolution driven by infotech and biotech, there's so many changes hitting us. Everybody is affected by either AI or by changing industrial dynamics or by things just continuing doing the things we did yesterday. It's not a very good recipe to preparing us for the future anymore. It might have been 20 years ago, not anymore. So suddenly the allowing for questions, allowing for questioning the status quo, allowing from ideation from happening in the organization is, there's this White's good company in China, Hire. And they have found this already quite a while ago. They said there's a direct correlation between how many ideas you allow to bubble up in your organization and the number of new products you can grow, and you can kind of, and not every idea is viable, but that's fine. The more ideas you have, the more possibilities you have of having good ideas bubbling up, So some companies are starting to become really good at this. And the answer, maybe back to Satya Nadella's environment, is just to let go of some things. Just saying, maybe I don't know, and let's not assume that this small group of leaders have all the information, but what can we do to invite everybody to chip in, especially in a knowledge-intense environment. So the managers often is not anymore the person who knows, because it's the experts around, and your role is to guide and to channel and to do all the things that you can do. Well, a factory setting might be slightly different, and even then I think listening to people on the shop floor for ideas and how things can do things better, faster, is also a way that, again, requires humility to assume that we don't know everything. So I think business case, I need to do more research, but what I'm finding already is that it's not only for the individual, it's for the individual and the team and the environment to thrive together. It's a great way of balancing exploitation and exploration. Often managers are saying that, I don't want to allow too many ideation because that will keep people from their efficiency. because then people continue. Now, I think that's typically kind of less efficient managers are talking about this, because good managers know when to allow for exploration versus, and then they say, okay, now we've done our ideation and let's move into production now. There was a recent beautiful piece of research that SurveyMonkey had been doing, and they found that curiosity combined with agility were two key aspects for a company to thrive in the current critical crisis information. Do I make sense?
Yeah, you did. I think one is the the evidence outside, and one is the evidence that you see for yourself. I think a few of the companies that you mentioned have crossed that emotional resistance to something like this, and I think, like you said, since you have a lot of ideas that power innovation, curiosity is the fuel that in turn powers these ideas. So there is a very clear correlation with all of this. Yeah. So
I had one question there, Stefan. You mentioned, some of these companies and their leaders. They're like the stars, who themselves are so curious, and you can see their curiosity in different ways. So, what are the manifestations of this curiosity for the people on the ground to actually feel that also to refer to your point about leaders seeing how curious their organizations are versus the non-executives having a different perception. So what are the manifestations of curiosity for people on the ground to feel that yes, we are part of a culture which is encouraging curiosity?
It's a beautiful question, Harish. Let me talk about the results first of what some of the kind of what you could see in a curious environment, and then we can see maybe what the benefit, what the traits are for a manager, and maybe some of the aspects people need to feel. I think the results of curiosity, and again, I'm basing myself on what research have focused. There's fewer decision-making errors in curious organization, because the more people are curious, the more they realize, for instance, what their confirmation bias is. The more people are curious, they're going to listen to each other, and you're going to limit groupthink. Also, you're going to be less stereotyping of people. So there's less decision-making errors. There's also less group conflict, and that's more related to empathic curiosity. The more you are you're able to put yourself in people's shoes, and not only try to kind of to think from my perspective and only my perspective. The more you're going to be able to relate to other people's ideas, be open for them, to also be able to open to people's emotions, people's reactions. Another result is that for both creative but also non-creative groups, there's more innovation happening if you're curious. There's also a better balance, as I said earlier, between exploration and exploitation. So these are some of the emanation. I think as an employee, how do I experience those things? It's interesting. I just started launching a team diagnostic. You have taken the individual diagnostic, the team diagnostic, and the individual diagnostic is all about how do I behave as a curious individual against my curiosity, the world, others, and self. The team diagnostic I'm doing now with a number of companies is how much is the environment allowing me to be curious or not. And there I find a number of dimensions already. The culture of ideation, the culture of, am I allowed to come up with questions? Can I ask naughty questions? Can I ask difficult questions? Can I ask questions about why are we doing the things we're doing? Maybe you don't have to ask those questions in town halls, but at least in smaller groups where there is kind of this psychological safety, I can question things. Can I venture ideas, or am I just asked to ask the things am I just asked to do the things I need to do? And do I come to the office every morning and my boss is telling me, oh, this is what your work package for the day, and for the rest, shut up and do what you need to do. Or the manager relationship, or the relationship with colleagues, or is there a sense of, can I fail here? Of course, you don't want to fail all the time around the same topic, but can I stick out my neck and fail at something? And do I get celebrated then? Do I get a thank you note from my CEO? You failed, but we learned something, and maybe we learned for some other project. Or is this tarnishing your career prospects, type of a thing? So again, that's psychological safety to drive this. And again, I think managers have a huge role to play there. Humility is an important one. This balance between exploration, exploitation, but also role modeling behavior is really keen. Being open to feedback. Am I open to feedback? One of the standard questions I asked during my performance discussions with my teams was, I always had one standard question is, how am I doing? And that it's also, I guess, a humility-driven question, because it can put you on the spot because you don't know what you're going to get back, type of a thing, you know. But just by venturing that question, there's so much I learned about myself, about the team, about things we can improve once you open that. And I would encourage everybody to do that. But that's also part of this role modeling. I'm curious about what do you think about me, type of a question. And I don't know whether I've fully answered your question, Harish, but I hope I touched upon some dimensions.
Yeah, definitely. And it, popped up another question in my mind. So I think it's safe to assume that, everyone here in this call will probably be talking of the price of not being curious as the most important thing. But have you ever faced that question from anyone who has asked you, what is the price of, being curious as an organization? Is there something that I'm, letting go in terms of so-called efficiency or some other, traditional metric, just because we're being curious?
It's a beautiful question. I've not heard the question. I saw in one of our Harvard Business Review paper by Gina Francesca, I think it was, is that she did some research around the topic of is curiosity, or is the assumption that curiosity will lead to inefficiencies, and she found that it isn't. That is more like an urban myth, that if you allow too much ideation and too much questioning, that would lead to inefficiency. There's absolutely no research that proves that statement. Now, I probably turn it around. What if you don't do it? And look at companies. If you're looking at the age of companies and how old a company gets, 100 years versus nowadays, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but last time I checked, numbers are coming down. Like, great companies are not lasting for 100 years anymore. It's more like 20 years or so. I need to double check those numbers. So, and that shows for me, it's not only about just having one idea and to thrive, it's about having a continuation of ideas. And when I was at Cognizant, I always said, I have 300,000 trainers here, 300,000 smart people, where every person has something to share with at least one other person. So it's not only about the managers or the leaders to come up with ideas, but anybody can come up with ideas. And if you have that, the process, the ability, the interest for starters, for allowing these things to bubble up, then I'm sure magic will happen. And it might come from a that you didn't realize as company leaders. And that would spark, I guess, something great towards the future. So what's the downside of it? I don't know. Or at least I do know. The downside is that you're not going to explore. If you have a perfect product, if you have a monopoly, then of course it's easier for me not to explore, because you're good for. But how many companies can say that? Maybe a government agency could say that, because they have the monopoly of that service in the country. So you typically also see, at least it's a stereotype. I've seen a lot of administrations who are not like this, but some are not as curious about improving things and changing their processes than others.
It's true. All right. So
you give me difficult questions.
Let's lighten it up a little bit, Stefaan, by turning the gaze inward. We've spoken about, you said in our questionnaire, it's curiosity about the world, about oneself, and about others. So before we do that, however, in all of our smartcasts, we like to ask one trivia question around the theme for the month. And we love our trivia quizzing, so we're going to put you on the spot and ask you this question, but we'll help you get to the answer if needed. All right, so all set?
All set.
Okay. So a few years ago, NASA ran a contest to name one of its rovers. The winner was a 12-year-old girl called Clara Ma, who said about her choice, she said, it's a powerful force. It gets me out of bed every morning. So what was her winning entry for this NASA rover?
Lovely question. Of course, it's curiosity.
How did you know that?
It's great.
Well done. Well done. Yeah.
You did also your I did also with my research. It's a beautiful statement. I think it's also beautiful that NASA is allowing or is inviting kids to contribute, because NASA itself is kind of way up there in terms of curiosity, kind of exploring space, and that they're allowing young adults to share thoughts. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's again the humility you spoke about.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what got you to create the Global Curiosity Institute. What is its mission, and what do you plan to do under that umbrella?
Well, with the institute, I want to be the spark that reignites curiosity for individuals, for society, for companies, because I think we need it nowadays to drive this. What drove me towards curiosity and what drove me towards setting up the institute? As I said earlier, I've been intrigued all my life as being the chief learning officer or head of the corporate university to realize what drives an individual and what is the right way for an individual to be curious, for an organization to allow curiosity, and how do you make all of that? And I was very fortunate to be able to work with beautiful companies and to try things out and to see how things are going. Interestingly, in the L&D space, few of us have been focusing on mindset and habits. We've been focusing very much on behaviors and on skills, but the habits somehow we shy away from, as if we don't really know how to deal with it enough. So I thought, what about setting up an institute to drive this? For companies, yes, but also for society at large. Because I'd love for every grandmother, for every student, for every teacher, people that are not necessarily part of the corporate fabric, to also learn skills. That's why, for instance, the diagnostic that you've taken yourself is free. And I want to do more either low cost or free services for society at large. It's yeah, that's why I set it up. So I guess I got to an age where I want to give back. I also want to really follow my passion. I had my own company in the beginning of my career. Then I moved into the corporate space, and now I'm back into a small venture, and it's so energizing. The feedback I'm getting from people that are volunteering with their time and with ideas, and suddenly we're doing a podcast like this because you guys think there's merit in discussing curiosity. Isn't that beautiful?
Right. And I also wanted to mention that for getting the right answer to the curiosity question, we're actually going to give you a little gift, which is, you can give this to someone else, you can use it for yourself, which is we run some groups around reading and kind of being aware of the future. It's called a reading compound because we believe that reading compounds over time. So that's your prize for doing well. So it's great that you mentioned habits. And for those of you listening, if you go to the Global Curiosity Institute website, there's a questionnaire that you can take, and that gives you a very nice, introduction to your levels of curiosity. And Stefan has already mentioned, uh, it doesn't look at curiosity as one single dimension. It breaks it down. There are different aspects. You can look at you can be curious about the world. You might be curious about other people, and of course curious about oneself, the reflection aspect that Stefan mentioned. So Stefan, we also read that you're into meditation. You clearly have you've had many hats in the past. So tell us a little bit about your curiosity habits, because what do you do to not fall in the trap of forgetting about the values of curiosity?
I guess for me it's a bit easier being doing curiosity and the institute all the time, and I need to talk about it, I need to research it. But I think for a long part of my career, I was just giving, and I was reading, and I was giving more than than giving myself back. And it was roughly, I think, about 7-8 years ago when I realized I was missing out on things. There's so much beautiful knowledge out there in the world that if we're not careful, we're missing out. And I've been talking to quite a number of leaders that being a good leader is not a trait. It's more like a state. You are a good leader now, and if you don't sharpen your soul constantly, there is a danger that after a while you're not going to be as good as you are today. So I made a very conscious decision those 7-8 years ago to start reading up on much more than I've ever before. And I started reading pretty much anything I can put my head around. It's like going into a bookshop and you're inspired by so much different stuff. I'm reading more the nonfiction part. And there's so much stuff around economics, around history, around anthropology, around psychology, So I started reading myself quite a bit. I'm now also doing I'm starting a master's degree in philosophy since this year, just to keep myself in tune with towards a degree even. And I'm trying to read. I'm trying to. There's so much stuff out there in terms of videos, in terms of books, in terms of audiobooks, in terms of podcasts like you're doing. There's no reason anymore to not to explore knowledge. Now often I'm trying to make the case there, and what I said earlier, like algorithms can be one reason why people are not curious.
Right.
And you would say that the internet is probably the only great innovation that was happening in the last 50 years or so. But there's still a lot of there's but there is an opportunity to use that tool towards becoming better.
Correct.
But there's also a possibility to use internet for more like killing time. And almost using that mindlessly in going through things, which is more a factor of being incurious almost, because the only learning happens with reflection.
Right.
If you read a book, if you see of YouTube, if you see a blog post, if you just read it and then go on, nothing happens. You're just wasting your time. You have to reflect on it while you're reading, after you're reading, and so there's also a gift that we can give to society, I think, in helping people to change how they learn, or giving them ideas how to approach knowledge in a new way. You know, so I'm trying to be curious.
Can you, I mean, what's on your bookshelf right now? Anything interesting that you can tell us about?
I'm reading a couple of things now. I'm reading one book on my Kindle, which is Range. David Epstein, I think he wrote it, and that's a book on the difference between narrow and broad knowledge. Do we all want to be a Tiger Woods, who started from when he was 7 months old, I read, and only did one thing? Or do we want to be more like a Roger Federer, who only started developing his tennis career when he was his teens, and his mother, who apparently was a tennis coach, didn't even want to coach him, because she thought, I don't know what she thought. But the Epstein is an important one. I'm reading, in an audiobook version, I'm reading Insight by Tasha Ulrich. It's around self-awareness. I'm reading many books at the same time. Sorry about that. I'm reading a book on the philosophy of curiosity now, and I'll stop here. There's a couple of other books I'm reading, but it's lovely.
Great. Range, by the way, is one of Harish's books of the year. I haven't managed to get around to it yet, but
Really?
I think I must. So I think we need to have a separate episode on just all the books that we'll enjoy recommending to each other. So this is not going to do it justice. So all right. So Stefaan, there's so much we could talk, but let's do a one final minute. We're going to do a little curiosity rapid fire just to close out things. All right. So here goes. So one place on earth that you're very curious about.
Mount Kailash.
Okay, good. Nice choice. Yeah. Strangest food item that you've ever had?
Fried ants.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, there is also a tribe in India that has a dish made of red ants. So we haven't tasted it, but yes, it's a curiosity in itself. What do people, what are the kinds of topics that you get asked a lot of questions on, apart from curiosity?
How can I improve it? Well, if curiosity is a topic, a lot of questions I'm getting from people is, great, I got the report now. What do I do? How can I improve? That's a constant question that's coming up, and I'm actually working on that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. One mystery that you want to solve or want to see solved.
Whoa. Whoa. Well, maybe I was thinking, first of all, why are we voting for the wrong people in our societies, and what are the drivers? Or not the wrong people, but the people that are not necessarily are lifting societies to a higher and better level of sophistication. But that's not a very politically correct answer. But that's a mystery to me.
Right. And I think all the things that you're reading will hopefully lead you somewhere to that, because it's all mixed up with anthropology and economics and psychology, right?
Yes.
So I think you have the right topics to chase that question, and it's a mystery. So I think you're not alone. All right. If let's close with this question. If you could spend a day in the mind, body, and shoes of a person, who would that
be? I think this is an Indian smartcast. I'd say Sadhguru.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to be in his mind for a day.
Okay.
If you'd allow me.
Interesting answer. All right, Stefan. So on that curious note, thank you so much. It's really been insightful, interesting. You've opened up a few threads for us to chase, and I'm sure the cats that you see here are not going to be killed by curiosity. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun. It was really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to get into the habit of reading or explore diverse topics that you wouldn't have read otherwise, CTQ Compounds is for you. Compounds are expertly curated by us and are a great way to slip in 15 minutes of reading non-fiction every day. The Future Stack Compound is perfect for anyone with their eye on the future. It gives you a regular dose of relevant info to keep you current and relevant in the future to come. For how you can be a part of a compound, go to ctqcompounds.com. You can also see what our compound members have to say about their experience there. That's ctqcompounds.com.
This is the CTQ Smartcast, where we have conversations about upleveling, deliberate practice, and getting future relevant.